continue with this now. Our borders open for international arrivals, as you've just heard, but two of our biggest leisure markets are not allowed in due to their infection levels. The USA and the UK make up a big chunk of our leisure tourism market. There are 57 countries banned from leisure travel to South Africa at the moment, but the whole of Africa is open, well, bar some glitches, as we heard from Kailisha. Let's discuss the opportunities that do exist. And I'm joined now by economist and executive director of the group Political Economy South Africa, Siya Beniza. Good evening to you, Siya. It was quite interesting listening to Kailisha, who's at the border post at Beitbridge, saying that it was all being processed from the South African side, but getting into the Zimbabwean side, it was not happening. And it just reinforces that while this is a wonderful opportunity to try and grow trade within Africa and with our neighbours, there is so much red tape, isn't there?
Yes, precisely. I think this forms part of the broader problems that are prohibiting regional trade in the region, which we refer to as non-tariff barriers. Traditionally, we think that trade is discouraged by high tariffs, which raise prices. But on the other end, it's an issue also of coordinating cross-border customs. And in this instance, it's also about at what stage each country is in terms of its own national response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And as it seems, Zimbabwe is still at a higher level of restrictions in terms of their risk-adjusted approach, while South Africa is easing. However, there is some level of coordination at SADC, but this has had a delay and has obviously been driven by the actual context in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic within each country and how well the public health response has been to the pandemic.
So if we want to capitalize on the markets that people are allowed to come from. So the whole of Africa is allowed to come to South Africa, as you rightly point out. If they've got restrictions their side, that's not going to happen. Just how open for business is Africa at this point, though?
Sure. I think we're at a point now that, the African integration process is being strongly driven also by economic interests. Historically, the process of African integration has been driven by the politics and agreements that were being put in place without necessarily encouraging the regional trade, which is what has really been the driver for regional integration elsewhere in the world. If you think of Europe, for example, one of the core reasons that led to the establishment of the euro, the single currency, was the difficulties of trading in all the multiple currencies across Europe. And so I think at this point, yes, Africa is open for business, and this is a great time given that we have a sort of first mover advantage, given that the impact that COVID-19 has had in terms of public health, which has allowed many countries to ease the restrictions quite quickly. However, sectors such as tourism will still suffer regardless as a result of the differences amongst countries, but also the additional restrictions that are necessary to put in place in order to secure the national response.
And of course, South Africa, with the highest infections on the continent, is seen as a risky country probably to come to. So if we have to focus on Africa at the moment, which countries do you think South Africa should be focusing on building good relations with?
Sure. I think the immediate neighbours within SADC region should be the core focus. And as you said, South Africa currently, given the death rate of the COVID-19 pandemic, is seen as a high risk. However, all of our neighbours have had less than 300 deaths in terms of the national impact of COVID-19 in their countries. And so this is a clear illustration of at least being able to move quite quickly in easing restrictions of trade and business amongst one another. And then obviously the rest of the continent is still open game, given that we've signed onto the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. But these sorts of arrangements will take medium to long term in terms of implementation. However, the immediate region, with SACU being the core and SADC region, is open and prime for business right now in order to kickstart the economic recovery, not just in South Africa, but in the region as a whole.
The reality is that the UK and the USA, they're not allowed to come here. We don't want them at the moment because their infections levels are so high. So much of our leisure tourism, people coming back to South Africa for their Christmas holidays, that sort of thing. Realistically, with those restrictions, if they stay in place for, let's say, up to December, less tourists surely is going to mean less work. We've just had absolutely horrific unemployment figures this week. Could this have a direct impact on jobs?
I think definitely. And what you're pointing to is also the unequal impact of the COVID-19 pandemic across sectors. I mean, yes, there is the allowance in terms of business travel, but this means that a large numbers that we see for tourism aren't going to be allowed to come to South Africa. And so the tourism sector as a whole is going to be most severely affected. However, there's still opportunity elsewhere. If you think of finance and other areas of business that will be allowed to continue to operate during this period while we're under level 1. And so, yeah, there definitely is going to be an unequal impact in terms of the economic fallout, but there are opportunities that exist still amongst the difficulties that we're still facing in the economic recovery.
Yeah, I guess now it really is the time to hustle for those opportunities. Thank you so much for your time this evening. Economist and Executive Director of the Group Political Economy South Africa, Sia Beniza.